Again from Oslo, from Norway. Today, spring is in the air. There is sun outside and the feeling that the weather gets a little bit warmer than we got used to until now. And I got a few minutes where I wish to continue the, let's call it, series of lectures I want to give on the topic of womb consciousness. I already made one, and it ended with a question. That was barely an introduction to the topic of womb consciousness. And this time, I want to open a different topic that is related with this womb consciousness and its complex reality. And I'm going to repeat that question I addressed at the end of the first lecture in February. And this question is, what is the first memory of the womb of your mother? And probably many of you will say, well, I don't have this kind of memory, or if I have it, probably I can guess it. It was when my mother gave birth to me. But in reality, the question would actually bring you a reflection of how you can remember how it was in the womb of your mother. How the womb of your mother, that was your first home since the conception until she gave birth to you, influence or put an important imprint on you as a human being having a memory. And it is true that most of us do not keep conscious memories, but in the body, through the nervous system and the mechanism the body so miraculously has to function and to connect to all sorts of sensations and feelings and dimensions, through the body, we actually can access those memories that are hidden. Some memories might have been lost and they will stay gone forever. But there are memories that, through specific methods, like, for example, identity-oriented trauma psychotherapy, or even sometimes constellation work on the body or on events that have been important for us in our lives since childhood or even before, we can see testimony, those energies that go back to that space, to the womb of our mother. It's a kind of magic, but it's all based on a phenomenon that is called resonance. A process of resonance that starts when we connect with the energy that is held in the body, in the psychology, in the emotional reality of a person. And this IOPT method I'm speaking about and that I practice is based on this resonance phenomenon. But I'm not here today in this lecture to explain you the method or the resonance phenomenon, but rather to give some insights also from this perspective that is experiential and phenomenological when I practice and I propose constellation work, that is energy-based work of therapy. I want to bring you some insights from all these perspectives about intergenerational trauma. Because when I asked this question about the womb of the mother, I was actually thinking about the fact that as a potential life, you have been already in the womb of your mother while she was in the womb of her mother and while the grandmother was in the womb of her mother, your great-grandmother, and so on. I usually use, when I teach about womb trauma or intergenerational trauma and how this propagates, a beautiful image of that Matryoshka's doll, that Russian's doll, where you have a bigger doll and inside smaller and smaller. And there are 5 in total. And I believe that somehow they have been created because actually probably in tradition from Russia or from Slavic space, we consider 5 generations. So when your mother was carrying you in the womb, you already had inside that womb the imprint from the mothers before for all the generations in matrilineage, because we speak about mother lines mainly, but of course you also take a lot of information, cellular information, and possibly traumas from the father and the father's mother, and so on. And it is widely accepted that all this trauma propagates intergenerational from the fourth behind. In my opinion, as I also practice shamanism and I sometimes in rituals and ceremonies, I could receive information that this propagation actually goes much deeper behind in time, so it can go to the 7th or even 9th generation. It also depends a lot on what kind of trauma, because if there has been a lot of abuse and repeated abuse from one generation to another on all sorts of levels, not only physical, but maybe also verbal and emotional, then let's say that there will be an overlapping. Sorry, my computer gives me warning sometimes. We have to understand that there will be an overlapping of different layers of traumas. And of course, we should then speak, but this will be the topic for another lecture, about the biography of trauma, starting with identity trauma, love trauma, sexual trauma, and then the victim perpetrator trauma landscape that is also very complex. But as I said, I'm not going to insist on these aspects. Today, I only want to focus and speak about the reality of the womb and how we build a consciousness that stems from the womb reality, knowing and understanding and also healing these intergenerational or matrilineage traumas. And I always like to bring examples from my own practice as a therapist, but also from my own, let's say, experience with healing these traumas and connecting deeply with those memories that might have been lost, but the body keeps the score, so the body will always remember. And I have a very strong memory that comes from a session I had, an individual session I had 2 or 3 years ago, where in the session of IOPT, I discovered, because that is something I didn't know, and I didn't even have a conscious memory of it. I discovered that I had a big identity trauma from the conception phase, because for some reason the uterus or the womb of my mother was not very welcoming and didn't want that seed to come inside and then become a fetus. And probably my mother was not even conscious of it. It was just probably a physiological answer or response, or maybe even energetic response of her womb. Maybe it didn't feel right or yet the moment for that fecundation to happen, but it happened. So I got a big no from the beginning, and I had to fight for life in that moment, and I managed, because now you see me here, so I'm still alive after 49 years, right? Actually should be 50, because the conception happens almost 1 year before. And interestingly enough, again, from a shamanic practice, I've learned that I have been conceived on the day of the revolution in Portugal, that is 25 of April, which is quite funny to understand, because it means that that energy of liberation and the revolution itself, that is an act of proclamation of freedom of people against authoritarian regimes, somehow might have impacted me and the conception through which I became a being, even if it was distant. At the time, of course, Romania was also under an abusive communist regime. But this is more like anecdotic part of the story. Returning to that trauma of identity, to the no that was said to me to live and to become a living being. In that session, there was another interesting aspect. I knew that without that method of IRPT, I probably could not have accessed that information, is that I was entangled energetically with an energy that suffered a lot and probably was a person that went through a lot of abuse, and probably even her own life was at a certain point in danger. I don't remember very well the explanation I received at the time, but I think it was something related either with concentration camp in the Second World War, or a person that suffered very much and finally find her death after a very difficult period before her life ended. And so I was practically somehow taking over energetically, wanting to help that energy. But that also probably created difficulties and obstacles to me in the sense that affected the way my identity was developed, and impacted also the possibility to actually have a healthy identity. Because trauma of identity, as the first layer or the first phase in the biography of traumas, is the one that creates the ground for more trauma to happen in our life, because it already fragments our psyche, and the body also will have the energetic and psychological, even emotional reaction to it. And of course, when fragmentation happens, in order to survive to this big no that we receive, to that sensation that we are not wanted and we are not welcome in that environment that is the womb of the mother, then we will find coping mechanisms. And I'm pretty aware right now, after several years of working with traumas, that one of the coping mechanisms I developed was to help and actually entangle myself energetically with other energies. And many of them are also coming from the previous generations, or also from my own family, or other people around me in the social sphere. And take on me those energy, becoming or taking on the role of helper, or the one who is always there to comfort or to do something for another, to the point that I will sacrifice myself for another, not even being aware of this. And I'm saying this just to understand what is the mechanism of this fragmentation, and what can, what is the direction or the consequence of it in our life. Because these coping mechanisms that are also known as survival strategies, they can work until a certain point, but then after a while we become tired, we become depleted, we get exhausted, and we might actually empty ourselves because we lack that sense of the self, of a healthy identity that also knows how to place boundaries, also knows what are her own rights, how to defend them, and so on. So we sometimes dissolve into this coping mechanism, we dissolve ourselves into the needs of others instead of taking care of ourselves and our own needs. And so I became aware in that IOPT session, where I brought my own intention, obviously, that I was entangled energetically with things from the past, with people I don't even know, or I don't even remember, that suffered a lot. And this is something that most people probably do to a certain extent, involuntarily, subconsciously. And I often hear especially in this spiritual arena where many people want to save the planet and save the world, and actually that they will heal their own previous generations by doing this work. And sometimes the focus gets so much into the others, into this past, because there is these previous generations, they belong to our past, to the place where we're coming from. That is the womb of our mother, but that womb belongs to many other generations too, as I explained at the beginning through the model of Matryoshka doll. They focus so much on this reality from the past, and even for many, it's much more important that actually they access information and try to search information from past lives, for example. That is a concept very abstract for me. That's why I prefer to stick to past generations, because they are much more real. And then actually we get back to centuries of these past generations. There are many, many behind us. And they forget, these people that focus too much on the past and how they could contribute to the healing of intergenerational and matrilineage trauma. They forget that all these realities and all this trauma is already inside themselves. And for women, the womb actually stores most of the trauma that happened in those wombs. And even outside the womb, but that impacted the womb reality. So I always reflect on what these people affirm, and sometimes I try to reply back and say, okay, why you are going outside of you to search for answers and to heal when you can do this inside? And actually this process will be much more effective than what you are trying to do, because you are just depleting yourself and fragmenting more into searching something that is so obvious and present inside. And you will ask me what this intergenerational trauma, that by the way, its propagation in intergenerational line has been proved also scientifically through studies that go into epigenetics and genealogy. Because it has been proven that the genetic code can suffer multiple changes and mutations due to the environment, to the effects the outer environment can have on our body, on our nervous system, and so on. And trauma usually is a disruptive event or situation that many times can come from this outer environment. In this case, from the womb of the mother while you are there. And then something happens to the mother, and then that event will impact, especially if it's highly disruptive, will impact also the fetus of the embryo, depending on the stage during the pregnancy. So if you ask me what is the connection of this trauma with the womb consciousness, I would very simply say that to create a healthy womb consciousness is equal to creating or recovering or reconstructing a healthy identity. But a healthy identity is possible only when you get out of your survival strategies that have been built around the trauma of identity. And in fact, our identity most of the time is shaped, and in many situations is shaped in a negative way, by the imprint or the influence those people that have been important in our life have on us. And the first and the more important person in our life is our mother. So if it happens that our mother is not present, or she denies the pregnancy from the first moment, but then she's forced to have us somehow, so we survive. If the mother is getting sick right at the birth or after in the first month or the first year, and is separated from us, or as we get sick and we are separated from her, these are always strong and obvious premises for a trauma of identity. In family constellation terminology, you would say that there is an interrupted movement because in the first days or in the first months or year after your birth, you are prevented to do the natural movement that each child does when going towards the mother, searching for her warmth, for her love, for attention, for nutrition, because she is supposed to breastfeed and so on. So this interrupted movement in many people, it doesn't matter if they are aware or not, it generates a trauma of identity. It's an initial split between the caregiver and the baby that needs the presence and attention and care of her in this case. And it is always good that we try to remember, because now I'm coming back to the initial question, what is your first memory of the womb of your mother? It's always good that you try to remember that first impacts that the presence of your mother when you were outside her body, but even maybe inside, had on you. Because sometimes these small insights, or even sometimes like the deja vu sensations we have, can come in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes there are just sensations, they are not even a thought or a complete memory. And of course, if we want to have them in a more complete way and to try to really connect deeply, we need to use methods that can provide this. What kind of intergenerational trauma can still impact us? Well, all those types I'm speaking when I speak about trauma biography, it can go from the loss of a person that creates a lot of grief, abuse, physical abuse that can create shame, sadness, a lot of anger. It can be also abortion and miscarriages. This actually impacts very much the womb reality of a mother, because then all the fetuses and babies that come after, they will be affected. They can actually entangle, especially when the one that is aborted or miscarried is not even given a name or recognized as a part of the family system. That can impact very much, and the child after, or the children after, can get entangled with that energy, and then they will suffer because they see that energy and they take it in their heart, but the system it's excluding it. So there is the potential for conflict, for disease, sometimes even for death, because each human being is different, so we'll have different ways of entanglement too at an energetic level. So there are all sorts of situations that can impact trauma. Even the fact that a woman has been persecuted, for example, during the witch hunt. And actually, this is one of the topics that many times comes back to me, because I have the feeling that I have in my intergenerational line women who have been very connected to earth and earth medicine and plant medicine, and might have been persecuted. And that suffering they had from this kind of abuse, from the persecution, actually has been transmitting along generations and reached me. I experimented in different circumstances in life this situation of being abused just because people are envious of the qualities I bring, or of the knowing or knowledge I have, and things like that, or what I know, what to do in certain circumstances, especially when it is related to helping and supporting other people. And this is quite common in all the women who nowadays choose to practice the art of shamanic medicine or to be therapists. And they sometimes have to confront the consequence of this persecution that comes and is propagated through a generational line, especially matrilineage. And when you entangle with these energies that come from the past, and we assume they're suffering, we assume that we have to carry something very heavy, like a burden for them, which is actually mostly something subjective and psychologically created. It's an artifact, an energy that we carry, but it, in reality, doesn't belong to us. But we carry it because we have this consciousness that we belong to that generational line, and somehow we are meant to also hold and process heavy energies for the others from the past. But this actually is not true. It's just an assumption that we make, and that in many cases can become a coping or survival strategy because it can justify why we feel so empty or so heavy, so depressed, so low in energy. And then we justify saying, okay, this is because I'm trying to still solve old karma or past generational trauma. And I'm telling you, you don't have to do it. You don't even have to have this assumption. Because the only thing that you are responsible for is your own healing. And while you are doing your own healing and you start to understand yourself, and especially in case of this identity trauma that comes also from the womb, you start to understand how this affected you or what actually happened to affect you in this way. You become conscious of yourself and you see how much you identify yourself with your mother, grandmother, grandfather, and so on, with all those from the past. Or even with those that you don't know, because you might know or have heard stories about some of them. And it's also interesting to see that sometimes also these stories that are repeated from a generation to another, and sometimes they are embellished and sometimes they are just impoverished. This story also conditions us a lot to think that we carry more than we just are supposed to carry. And then we assume this responsibility for the others in the past, not understanding that is not ours. We are in intergenerational line according the orders of love, that is concept that Bert Hellinger, the one who founded Family Constellation, created. In this order of love, we are the smallest energy, and all those from the past are higher and higher and higher according each generation. So we don't have any real duty towards all these past generations, if not to honor them, to bow in front of them and recognize that they are higher energetically, and to say thank you for the gift of life, because we took life from all of them. Our life will not be possible without all of them. Therefore, when I speak about womb consciousness, I symbolically say I can create this womb consciousness in my own consciousness when I become aware that in these orders of love, I have my own small place and I have to honor it as it should be. Because in the case that I choose to be bigger than all of them and save them all or heal for them or do anything else for them that I am not supposed to do, then a disruption happens. Then accidents, conflict, disease happens. And this is something that is very difficult to actually explain because many people don't really understand this concept. But when you live it, when you work with these tools, with this method I already mentioned, everything becomes very clear. And of course, in many situations, those people who have been, let's say, arrogant enough to say, oh, I'm healing all my past generations. I'm doing such a deep work in healing intergenerational trauma because I am big and I want to do it. And it's a mission, a life mission, exactly. When we are so arrogant and become so big and want to save if not the generations before, at least part of this world, as long as we live, we forget why we are here, why we came into this life. And again, we entangle all over again with those energies of the past that most of the time will prefer to stay there in the past, to not be disturbed. Because if you disturb your ancestors too much and too often, they can also get pissed off. They are entitled. They are bigger than you anyway. And as you notice behind me, I don't know how to put myself, there is part of an image that shows a woman bleeding, connecting with the earth, and the bleeding becomes the roots of a big tree. And I wanted to place here this image because it's very much illustrative for the concept of intergenerational trauma. Many women, when they bleed, when they shed the skins, the layers of tissues from their womb, they bleed with pain, with grief, with sorrow, with shame. Many of them suffer of endometriosis and other disorders and diseases of the womb. And this many times comes from these past traumas. Because we keep accumulating, and the body needs to release all this accumulation. And actually the practice of breathing on earth, going into the forest, especially now that it will become warmer, and it will be possible again to go in the green forest or on the beach. This bleeding to the earth is an ancient practice and reestablishes the connection with nature, with Mother Earth, that we women have lost for many centuries. And when we reconnect in this way, we start to tap into this concept that I call womb consciousness. Reflect on this. Reflect on the teachings I brought you today. And if you have further questions, you just connect with me. And if you're curious to experiment either IOPT or constellation work in relations with your traumas or with other events of your life, I welcome you to connect with me and speak about it. And before I finish, I want to ask another question. So this question will be the start of the next lecture in the future about womb consciousness. And probably we will go into direction of love trauma. But I might also touch in many other aspects of the biography. And I will address this question both to men and women. But for women, I will ask in a different way. So I will ask you to try to connect energetically in this moment with your womb. You can take a deeper breath just to connect, relax, and then connect with that energy inside your womb space and try to give it a name. Or maybe you can express it through a sound. Or maybe you perceive a shape or a color. Try to identify that energy. It might be a sensation or an emotion also. Or maybe there is a memory there that comes back to you now. And see if you can embrace that energy or memory in a loving way. It can be just in your heart, with a thought, with a symbolic present or gesture. You might just want to touch yourself over your womb. See how it is. How do you feel about it? And for men, you have the energetic imprint of the womb of your mother. So imagine that you have in front of you your mother right after she gave birth to you. And instinctively try to sense, to feel what was her first gesture toward you. Or maybe you remember it, even if it's not a conscious memory. There is something inside, and your intuition tells you, yes, it was like that. Try to imagine that scene of your mother after giving birth to you. Was she searching for you, wanting to kiss you, to embrace, or was she cold and almost emotionally distant, upset, or maybe a little bit depressed and tired? Try to search for an answer for this question or this invitation I'm addressing to you, and see how it feels. What is that word that comes to you, or the memory, or the intuition? And I salute you for today, and looking forward to connect again next time.